Okay, we got the recording started. Norman, do you have something you wanted to share?
Well, Dan, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. I was having some audio trouble. I am, in my case, I had to go log on, well, do a Google search for the Environmental Flows Work Group and click on the agenda to get the Microsoft Teams link. I don't know, that maybe just me because I switched jobs recently, but it's possible that some of the people we're waiting on didn't get a easy to click link. Just an FYI, just a thought.
Yeah, let me give me a second and I'll send them a quick email. Give me just a minute, everybody. Okay, I just forwarded the meeting link to them in case they didn't get it. These meetings are a little tricky, the way it's set up at the water boards for people to join. We send out the meeting list, but you need to click on them and download them. You can also access it through the actual agenda, but if you don't download them onto your computer, it doesn't work. We can't send out actual meeting requests. Check the chat here. Yeah, so there was an email that went out on 11/7. If anybody's trying to join that is still having trouble getting on, anybody you know. So from the round robin standpoint, was there anything anybody wanted to share? Why don't we go ahead and give it a couple more minutes, since this is our only agenda item today, and it was scheduled to start at 10:15 anyhow, so they might be joining at 10:15. So we'll give it a few more minutes, and then if we can't connect with them, then we'll bump it to the next meeting. It will be a very short meeting today.
I just dropped a text. I think her name is the one that's on the presentation. So if I hear back, I'll mention it. Otherwise, I'm with you on cutting it short.
Okay. Yeah, we'll give them maybe a few more minutes, and then we'll go from there.
Hello?
I think she's joining.
Hello.
Najwa.
Hi. Yeah, I
Hey,
wasn't
thank you for
sure
joining
if
us.
yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure if the meeting was taking place. I never received any further information. But yeah, I just got a text from Mark and then I got your email. So hi, Mark.
Oh, my apologies.
Hi, welcome. All right, Daniel, we'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, introducing Dr. Petois. Are you prepared to do the presentation?
I'm prepared. It's yeah, I didn't get much time to, adapt it fully for this group, but I think it has good information, so I can do that.
Okay, great. Well, I can go ahead and turn it over to you. If you hit the share button, you can go ahead and share your presentation.
Okay. Um, I'm assuming you can see can you see the presentation? And
Yes, it just came up.
is it in presentation mode? Because I'm working on a laptop. I can't tell if,
Yes, it
okay,
is
so you
the
don't,
correct mode.
okay, perfect. So you don't see other slides or,
That's correct.
okay, thank you. All right. Okay, thank you for having me. This is a presentation I had prepared previously for SCB Water, the Water Resources and Watershed Committee. And I got short notice if I could give that same presentation to this group. So these are the slides that I had previously prepared. And basically it's we have a water resilience initiative that was launched a few years ago, where we are taking a more integrated watershed approach to how we manage our water resources to meet several goals. One is water supply reliability. There's also environmental flows and ecological objectives, and then also meeting groundwater sustainability goals under the GSP. And we have other objectives that include, impacts to the ratepayers, and then, having partnerships with other stakeholders. So this presentation, I'll provide just a brief overview of that resilience initiative, followed by where we are in our application of the environmental flows framework. So as a water purveyor, SCB Water has a responsibility to ensure water supply reliability. Our water supply is intrinsically linked to imported water, groundwater, recycled water, and our local ecosystem. Each of these elements impacts our reliability and could potentially create vulnerabilities. So we need to understand our surrounding to be able to address any future challenges. This scrutiny and understanding will allow us to determine the appropriate projects that ensure the health of our system, as you can see by the highlighted green boxes, through a stakeholder engagement process, which we are still developing. We will evaluate different adaptation strategies that we can take through projects, investments, and water demand management. So the resilience initiative is an opportunity to integrate SCV Water's mission and values, as well as its policies on the upper Santa Clara River. It's driven by the needs for water supply reliability, ecology, and regulatory framework. The initiative employs an improved planning methodology that uses sophisticated models to understand and plan for future climate and regulatory challenges. And this initiative is essentially looking at all the pieces and how they fit together. Today, we're focusing specifically on the river, which is part of our local water supply. And as you know, groundwater and recycled water have a connection to the river system. So that's kind of where, SEF fits into this resilience initiative. So I'm going to move now and focus on where we are with SEF. So the agency embarked on applying the SEF to the upper Santa Clara River. As you all know, SEF is co-developed by agencies of the State Environmental Flows Work Group, and it provides a method to quantify flow ecology relationship in a stream. It helps with identifying flow ranges that support different ecological functions. Both SEF and the Water Resilience Initiative try to find this sweet spot in terms of balancing our needs for water from the river system and ways to manage the river to improve its ecological values. SEF is understood by regulatory agencies and is an effective tool to communicate with them. That's why we chose it, even though we are not required to do so. It allows us to take the driver's seat that rather than react to any future regulations. And as you know, there are 12 steps and 3 sections in SEF. I've highlighted, it's not necessarily a linear progression. We have adapted it to our needs and the information that we have locally. And what's the main items that still remain are setting ecological management goals and water management objectives to be able to complete the process. And so, as I said, we have adapted this framework to better serve our needs and the information that we have. And so our approach starts with assessing conditions that exist today, followed by examining historical flow alterations. We developed a habitat suitability model for aquatic species because we saw that there were factors other than flow that impacted the habitat, and that's mainly invasive species and temperature. And then we assess the flow functions on riparian vegetation, and we will be examining strategies to preserve and enhance habitat. This map shows the study area. It's the main stem of the Santa Clara River in the East Basin in Los Angeles County. Extending from Bouquet Canyon Road downstream to the upstream edge of the Piru Dry Gap, slightly west of the Ventura County line. The locations of interest are a series of stream reaches that have distinct differences in surface water expression during dry season base flow, determined by the character of their surface water groundwater dynamics. So basically gaining and losing reaches. The area contains several GDEs identified in our groundwater sustainability plan that support different protected species. And thanks to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, we have new piezometers collecting valuable data. I know it's hard to see, but basically the black text that has a number followed by a letter are how we divided the river into all the different reaches that have similar geomorphologic characteristics and flows. And then the purple text are all the GDEs in the area. And we have the red triangles. This is are kind of important in our study because they are sources of flow. So we have the Saugus Water Reclamation Plant upstream, and then the Valencia Water Reclamation Plant is the next triangle downstream. And as you all know, this hydrograph, so what we developed this hydrograph, which is based on, okay, a GDE is a groundwater dependent ecosystem. Those were defined and developed during the Groundwater Sustainability Plan development. And yeah, so this hydrograph here, sorry, someone asked what is a GDE? I'm assuming everyone saw the chat. But so yeah, this hydrograph is based on daily data for the Piru gauge, which is the downstream end of the study area. And it's from water years 1927 through 2023. And it is illustrative of the type of analysis done for SEF, where the goal is to identify functional flows, which are hydrograph components that provide a distinct geomorphic or ecological function. For instance, UTS breeds in spring recession flows. They like still emergent vegetation in April, so hydrology in April has a big effect on egg survival and incubation. Between April and November, UTS is going through the adult phase and looking for refugia to feed and not be prey. So what's this, this hydrograph is really showing, one of the take-home messages is that you have very high flow variability, and you can see sometimes there's a lot of flow and sometimes you don't have as much. We also, in terms of data sources, we use several sources of data. We use gauge data, which is the most accurate data and provides 17 years of flow records from LA County Sanitation Districts and the USGS gauges at 5 points along the river. We created water balances that separated out water discharged from the two water reclamation plants, the Saugus and Valencia WRPs. We also have a groundwater flow model with a river package, and it's good for considering changes from the baseline. So it helps with comparative analysis. The TNC, the Nature Conservancy Natural Flows database model, was used as well. It's an accepted model by SEF for determining no flow alteration. And we used aerial photos to extend our data records. We overlaid aerial photos and groundwater data for the same period and investigated linkages between rainfall, groundwater level, and stream flow. This was complemented by a review of historical aerial photos of the river from the 1940s and 50s prior to the construction of the water reclamation plants to estimate whether the additional flows changed the extent of the riparian corridor. The Santa Clara River has been altered over time. And so we've been looking and examining how the system has changed and what actions we can take. Typically, reservoirs have big influence on pulse flows, but not in our watersheds. We don't really have reservoirs that have where we are managing flows significantly, that significantly changed the flows in the river. Wet season peak flows are not out. So basically, wet season peak flows are not altered because we don't have dams that we operate. Groundwater pumping can reduce flows. Imported water and return flows, as well as water reclamation plant discharges, can increase base flows. And then invasives can concentrate channels, making flows faster and deeper, and they can threaten native species. This plot here is a long-term, it's a plot of long-term annual flows across the county line. The data starts in 1953, and groundwater use was reduced as agricultural lands were converted to municipal and industrial in anticipation of state water project imports. In 1972, the agency received the first deliveries of state water project water, and you begin to see increasing discharge across the county line. What this graph also is showing or looking at is the river as a single unit versus looking at individual reaches that we divided it into for the Ceph analysis. So again, just looking at the river as a single unit, we estimated the unaltered condition, which is required by Ceph, even if it doesn't require us to go back to these unaltered conditions. It's, this gives us a degree of the alteration for different reaches of the river. And this chart on the left, this box plot, shows dry season base flow of the annual hydrograph at the county line and Piru dry gap gauges. The blue boxes show observed flows, and the green boxes show natural flows. And you can see there is more water from the blue boxes. So there's more water than used to be. So that's, no surprise because of the water reclamation plants. Valencia water reclamation plant alone discharges in the 25 CFS range. And this table on the right summarizes the findings at the Piru flow gauge. There was not a high degree of alteration except for dry season base flow at the bottom of the basin in the Piru dry gap compared to natural conditions. The analysis shown here is, this table here shows one section of the river, but we did it for the different reaches of the river. And we reviewed measured flow. We reviewed measured flow aerial photos and output from the groundwater model, and all the data suggest that area is incredibly variable, and that variability corresponds to the natural variability in hydrology of this river system. Pumping of groundwater has indirect influence on flow that occurs in this area, but it doesn't fundamentally change the natural variability. The earliest image is from 1947. You can see the legend. Red represents ephemeral reaches, orange is intermittent, green is semi-perennial, and blue is perennial reaches. So in the 1940s, we started to extract groundwater extensively, but there was also tremendous return flows as high as 30%. I'm sorry, I don't have labels of the, kind of significant roads and reclamation plants, but where the McBean Parkway is around here, it's where we would have started to see groundwater emerging. And then around the I-5 bridge, we would have been perennial or semi-perennial. So somewhere around here. And then downstream of Valencia treatment plant, around this area, there was a pretty wide riparian corridor historically before the plants came online in the 1970s. So it's a pretty resilient reach that is fed by groundwater. So that's kind of the western, if you want to think about it, the western part of the river. And in contrast, you can see the eastern side is more fragile with perennial reaches created by the Saugus water reclamation plant. And I clicked a bit too soon, but this aerial here is showing 2023. And it shows how the reaches downstream of the water reclamation plants, so around here and then around here, they were not perennial and now they are perennial because of these reclamation plants. And so these aerials are showing the river is not uniform, and that's why we've focused on different needs for different reaches. Yeah, so these circles are where we now have perennial flows because of the reclamation plants. So in initiating understanding of in-stream flow requirements and SEF work, having a picture like this to communicate with different stakeholders and regulatory agencies to begin to recognize that dry reaches are a natural expression of this stream is important. There are intermittent reaches that vary with hydrological year type, and there are perennial spots that are resilient and act as refuge during extended droughts. In-stream flow requirements change depending on where you are. As we consider influences on the system, we have to look at these different areas with different habitats considerations. We can generalize our study area into 4 reaches. The orange area is between Bouquet Canyon Road and McBean Parkway. And there are flows because of the Saugus water reclamation plant up to a certain extent where the McBean dry gap occurs, as shown in red. The dark blue area is between McBean Parkway and the Valencia water reclamation plant. And historic aerial photos from the 1950s to present show a reach that is ephemeral near McBean Parkway and then experiences groundwater upwelling. The location and length of the upwelling zone has varied cyclically in response to wetter and drier conditions. This area of upwelling near the I-5 bridge, it's this, I don't know if you can see it, it's the almost kind of a bit vertical yellow line. So this area of upwelling near the I-5 bridge supports habitat for endangered species with fully protected status. So we are interested in this area. And then the light blue area is downstream. And the Valencia water reclamation plant creates perennial flow in a large parts of the basin until around Castaic Creek confluence. Historically, that reach would have been perennial under average and wetter than average climate conditions, but potentially intermittent during prolonged droughts. And finally, the purple area is downstream of the confluence with Castaic, and it's a large portion of the river is fed by both the Valencia water reclamation plant and groundwater upwelling. The river likely ran dry in the summers of long dry periods, such as the 2014 through 2020 drought. So the next set of slides provide an example of the natural flow analysis done for the different reaches. We focus on McBean Parkway dry gap and how it's varied over time. So I'm not gonna go through, showing a detailed analysis of each one of these areas in the colored circles, but just the McBean Parkway dry gap, the red circle. So that's an example. Sorry. So, you know, one of the areas of the river where habitat is most sensitive to flow is the area of the I-5 bridge. The examination of natural flow conditions in this area is very important to future considerations of flow objectives. So that's one of the reasons I focus on the McBean Dry Gap. And what we have here is an aerial image showing flow of water from right to left. The red downward arrow shows where water disappears downstream of the Saugus Water Reclamation Plant. And the blue triangle shows the location of where water comes back up. The hashed red area at the bottom of the image shows the length of the dry gap. So this here is an example of where water would have infiltrated.
No,
Yeah.
Najwa, you're breaking up a bit.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you want me to repeat what I just
Yeah,
said?
I don't know
or...
if it's just on my end or if everybody else is hearing a little breakup. Okay. Continue on.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. No, good. Thank you. Yeah, so this, you know, this image is an example, you know, in 1 year, again, depending on hydrologic year type, water just downstream of the Saugus Water Reclamation Plant, you see there's no water infiltrates into the groundwater basin. So you see dry, the river becomes dry, and it stays dry up to a certain point downstream. And, you know, and that's denoted by that blue triangle. And so the next, so this, you know, the point from infiltration to emergence is what we call the dry gap. So the next slide here is showing the same image as I showed on the previous slide, but it's zoomed out to show a larger section of the river. And yeah, you can see, I think I mislabeled this, but sorry, yeah, one second. In a wet, okay, so this here is showing a wet year, and you can see there is a small gap between the infiltration and emergence points. And the next slide shows a dry year. So it's 2007, and it was a critical dry year, and you can see the distance between the points is large. This slide here shows a plot of infiltration and emergence points for data between 2002 and 2022. The length of the dry gap is highly variable depending on hydrology. So again, you know, the red are the infiltration points and the blue dots are the points of emergence. And you can see that the locations at which water infiltrates is pretty clustered. And we know that the ground near the Saugus Water Reclamation Plant, so this is the flow from Saugus, is highly conducive to recharge. So we would expect that the infiltration points would be more localized. Where it rises is highly variable, and you can see that from the scatter of the blue dots, and it depends a lot on hydrology. And we have put a schematic together just to try to understand what is happening with this dry gap over time. And our hypothesis is that when the groundwater table is high, so that's the dark blue line here, and then on the left it's slanted. So when it's high, we know that upwelling will occur further upstream, so to the right of this image. And then when it is when it's low, it occurs to the left or more downstream. And so we do think that upwelling is a function of the water table, or or the water table is one of the more dominant factors in determining where groundwater upwelling occurs. And so that's something we're studying further with groundwater modeling and additional data collection. And so we hope we will get a better understanding of what's going on in the near future. One other thing that we did was we did a plot to see if there is any correlation between the precipitation cumulative departure from mean and the length of the dry gap. So as I mentioned earlier, we think that the variability in the dry gap is highly natural, and we know that groundwater pumping affects it, but we also wanted to understand the natural conditions in Ceph. So as we look at the entire river, we know we have complicated relationships between depth, velocity, and temperature of flow. So we developed a habitat suitability model to be able to look at different sections of the river. The habitat suitability model is essentially made up of curves obtained from field studies for the agency, as well as literature values that correlate velocity, depth, and temperature to habitat suitability. And I only have a summary of this, why we did the habitat suitability model, because it wasn't, the main focus of this presentation, but I did want to acknowledge that, that's one of the steps in section B of the California Environmental Flows Framework. And we recognize that flow has been altered, by temperature and invasive species, making the channels narrower and deeper. So we wanted to have a model to be able to analyze that. And we started with a 2022 LIDAR survey of the river channel. That's how we constructed the model, and we developed a hydraulic model of the river that could output velocity and depth at different, basically any point, any pixel, any point in the channel. And then separately, we had temperature, monitored temperature at different reaches of the river. And these three variables we can use to develop these habitat suitability curves. And with the habitat suitability model, we're looking at species affected by the altered flows. And we, so far, we have developed a habitat suitability curves for unarmored three-spine stickleback and the Santa Ana sucker. And here I have a table of the species of special concern that we're looking at, for our study. And this slide shows preliminary findings. We're looking at groundwater relationships. And we know from Saugus Reclamation Plant to the McBean Parkway, it's that area is unaffected by groundwater fluctuations. We have an ephemeral reach where the dry gap occurs that varies in length based on hydrology. The habitat suitability model indicates that on average flow is the limiting factor for unarmored three-spine stickleback and Santa Ana sucker upstream of the Valencia water reclamation plant. More flow would benefit UTS, providing temperatures remain similar to present. Preserving groundwater upwelling in sensitive areas is a key objective of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And temperature appears to be the limiting factor for UTS downstream of the Valencia water reclamation plant. Less cooler flow would likely benefit UTS in this reach. For Santa Ana sucker, depth and substrate appear to be limiting factors downstream of the Valencia water reclamation plant. And basically, what we see is that Santa Ana sucker and unarmored three-spine stickleback, or SAS and UTS, have different velocity and depth needs. SAS may benefit from more flow downstream of the Valencia water reclamation plant, depending on the temperature of the flow. And I have some preliminary findings. And basically, SEF, just kind of a quick review. SEF is the State Water Resources Control Board process to get a good idea of the environmental flows and better understand our system. It provides the science to support our permit applications, such as for groundwater wells or recycled water. And so we are developing the tools and science to prove that we can change things for the better. The main changes to the hydrology of the Santa Clara River since the formation of Castaic Lake Water Agency are the addition of the Saugus and Valencia Water Reclamation Plant dry period flows. Upstream of Valencia, dry season length of wetted channel is closely correlated to hydrology. And the reach downstream of Valencia to Castaic Creek was historically likely perennial prior to the construction of the Valencia reclamation plant due to persistent groundwater upwelling. The riparian corridor between Valencia and Castaic is primarily persistent and robust to water management actions, though altered by invasive arundo. And as we've done analysis, we've seen that on average, flow is the limiting factor for UTS and SAS upstream of the Valencia water reclamation plant. More flow, such as, from either groundwater upwelling or from the upstream watershed, would benefit UTS, providing temperatures remain similar to present. Temperatures appear to be the limiting factor for UTS downstream of the Valencia water reclamation plant. So here, we know that less cooler flow would likely benefit UTS in this reach. And depth and substrate appear to be the limiting factors for Santa Ana sucker downstream of the Valencia water reclamation plant. And I've mentioned this earlier, SAS and UTS have different velocity and depth needs. SAS may benefit from more flow downstream of Valencia, depending on the temperature of the flow. We are thinking of solutions through the Water Resilience Initiative, but first we want to establish the natural state of the river. We want to understand how the river has functioned historically and the different actions and factors that may influence it. There might always be tension between the various objectives, but through this process, we are looking for sweet spots, not just a balanced system. So, kind of next steps in our process, we mentioned we have a habitat suitability model which is a tool created in our application of the SEF framework. It will be helpful, but we are also focused on receiving inputs on costs from recycled water evaluations that have been authorized by the SCV board, because we, changing discharge of recycled water from those two main plants could have potential benefits for habitat suitability in the different reaches of the river. In parallel, we are evaluating improvements for our groundwater modeling tools and analysis capability. So we can better simulate how different management actions in our groundwater basin can affect surface water groundwater interaction and subsequently habitat suitability. And we also have a water supply reliability model, which is a long-term planning model for our water supply portfolio. And the way it's connected with these other two components is that groundwater in an average year makes up about 50% of our supply portfolio. So, but we rarely get average years. And we know that if we want to depend on our groundwater basin in extended droughts, we want to make sure that we're not adversely impacting the groundwater levels as well as flows into the flows in the Santa Clara River. So we're not necessarily coupling all these three models, but we are coming up with processes to communicate between the three models so we can understand the benefits of our actions on each one of these different objectives. So really the integration, this water resources integration model will help us tie in how everything fits together. We can develop new integrated water supply portfolio options, such as adding, such as, for instance, alternative groundwater operating strategies or new programs for SCV water. And, I know I didn't really describe our water portfolio, supply portfolio, but SCV water has, gets imported water and relies on local groundwater and a little bit of recycled water. But in wet years, on the State Water Project, we have excess water that we store in banking programs in the Central Valley. And we're also doing studies locally to see if we can recharge our groundwater basin and retain some of this water to be able to use it in future dry years. So that's kind of what, we're trying to come up with these operational strategies that can store water for future years while also enhancing the ecology of our river system. And, knowing there are many pieces to this, initiative, there are many stakeholders and many objectives. We want to have a stakeholder process where we can evaluate the benefits of different strategies. For instance, one strategy could be cooling down of recycled water from the two reclamation plants, knowing that UTS prefers cooler temperatures. We can also, we will be evaluating what it would take to treat recycled water to drinking water standards for direct reuse. That means less recycled water into the river. So we would want to understand the impacts of that. If we modified our groundwater pumping plan, we might change the location of where we pump in our basin and see what impacts it has on different reaches of the Santa Clara River. And we can also make alterations outside our watershed, such as investing in banking projects in the Central Valley, or investing in new water, such as Sites Reservoir up, it's being planned up in Northern California, or improving the State Water Project facilities through the Delta Conveyance program. So, this picture just shows that, or recognizes we have all these different objectives and needs, and through the Resilience Initiative, we will be looking at all these different objectives and trade-offs. And that's all I have for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patoy. Does anybody have any questions? It looks like I will call on you. Let me get to my people list here. Katie.
Hi there. Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. It was really cool. So I'm wondering, especially with the temperature findings, there's already, with the sanitation districts, are already doing a study in that area that's directly looking at temperature effects. So I'm just wondering how much this project overlaps with that, because, well, there's already a lot of overlap anyway. So I'm just wondering how you're like sharing resources and working together on that.
Yeah, we are coordinating. We have the same consultant team, ESA, working on, they worked on our habitat suitability model. We're sharing that data with the sanitation district, but, during development of that model, they used prior temperature studies that were carried out for the sanitation districts. And we have regular meetings, so there's a lot of coordination going on.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be important, especially with like the management strategies.
Yes.
Coming up with, yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'm hearing none. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So we'll jump back to the next agenda item, which we kind of covered before. I don't think there's any round robin updates. If anybody has anything that they'd like to share, or potential agenda topics for the next meeting. All right, I'm hearing none. As always, a lot of our presentations and ideas for our conversations come from within the group. So if you have anything or know of anything that's going on that you think would be good to share with this group, please let me know. You can email me at my emails on the website. And I think that will be a wrap if there's nothing else. All right. Thank you, everybody.